We're going to agenda item 14, Richard L. Jackson County Judge at 1:30, discuss on PIDs and county roads. And this is Mr. Clay Benford from, you living out of, Medina County?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He has to put up with Judge Shuhart over there. And what we asked you to come over for is we're getting to the point, we have so many county roads, we can't afford to keep them paved, or keep them maintained.
Sure. So for the record, my name is Clay Benford. I'm with the law firm of McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. And my history is I am a public finance attorney. I represent local government, cities, counties, school districts, hospital districts, things of that nature, in pretty much every aspect other than the general counsel type work. So with a focus on debt, bonds, lease purchase financings, special development agreements with developers. I think it's important to note that I do not represent developers. My practice is exclusively is limited to municipal government. I do represent underwriters of traditional municipal bond transactions, but my focus and my practice is geared towards assisting the local government. So I've been doing this for 20 years. This is the only practice that I've ever conducted. I tell people that in my world, most attorneys that you know are probably a mile wide and an inch deep or foot deep. I'm a foot wide and a mile deep. Ours is very specialized. It's very based off of an apprenticeship. You have to have good mentors behind you, but then also you have to have a creative mind to learn as you go because, as you know, counties in particular are limited by the powers that are vested upon you by the Texas legislature, whereas private entities can do, or private organizations can do anything but what the law says you can't. So it's coming from a different direction. So I live in Medina County, born and raised. My practice is in downtown San Antonio, but I have a lot of local contacts with Medina County, having grown up there. And so probably in about 2010, 2011, I'll step back a little bit even further. Medina County was anticipated to have experienced the type of growth that we're experiencing right now in 2007, 2008, 2009. And working with the local school district, Medina Valley ISD, when we were planning a 2007 bond election, I went into the superintendent's office and the walls were just covered with platted subdivisions. Well, then the 2008 financial crisis happened, the housing boom busted, and we went into economic recession at that point, which really, I think, gave the county about 5 to 10 years of reprieve. And so the county was not, in my opinion, prepared for the level of growth that was going on there. And in about 2011, we started seeing some what I call wildcatter developers that were coming out into what they referred to as the frontier at that point in time, which is far eastern Medina County, just on the border of Bexar County, northeast quadrant, Petrenko Road, Culebra, Medina Lake, that portion of the county. And so I was reading, I was at a global law firm at the time, and my law firm had been representing a municipality in Del Rio against a particular developer. And I read a local article in the Castroville News Bulletin that developer was in discussions with Medina County to put a development on in our eastern quadrant. And so I called the county judge at that time, Jim Barden. I said, sir, you don't know me from Adam, but I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I'm very familiar with the developer that's coming to town. So I'd like to help the county out to be sure that we hold them to standards of development that we can all be proud of, because what they're going to do is set a baseline for everything on a go-forward basis. And the county commissioner at that time in particular, a gentleman named Larry Sitter, has been very progressive in supporting development, but a particular kind of development, and one that is particularly focused on development paying its own way and not overburdening what are already taxed county resources for the people that were already there. And so we started on this process of accommodating the developers to a degree in exchange for extracting from them some things that were of particular value and importance to the county. And I'll talk about those in particular, but I want to step just one more, I'm setting the table, that Medina County is probably not that different from Wilson County in the fact that you have very few home rule municipalities in the county. You might only have one. We only have one in Medina County, and that's Hondo. But we have several general law cities, but we have a bunch of unincorporated territory. And the unincorporated territory happens to be where all of the development is occurring. And as you well know, you have no subdivision authority except with the regulation of septic tanks for the most part in unincorporated areas that give you an ability to dictate what type of development can occur. And there's a very strong development lobby, and every 2 years it seems like there are less and less protections against the local governments to be able to have a say in what's coming into their community. One of the most recent ones, I guess, is the session before last, where there is no longer an opportunity for municipalities to govern what exterior mesa or what exterior facade is on any buildings that are located within their boundaries by ordinance. So what we found, though, is you have the opportunity to contract with people coming into your county for certain things. And most developments that you're going to see these days, they are relying on some type of public support in the form of public improvement districts or special districts or something of that nature, which in an unincorporated area is within the sole purview of the county in order to grant the authority to do that. So this is what we view in Medina County as an opportunity to enter into negotiations with the developer. So what's a public improvement district? In comparison to something that you might be more familiar with, like MUDs, municipal utility districts, or freshwater supply districts, or freshwater control and improvement districts, a PID is not a separate legal entity. It is not a separate political subdivision. It is a management tool across a specified geographic area that is within the purview of the Commissioner's Court to govern things such as issuance of debt, expenditure of proceeds that are derived from the district, and things of that nature that are specified within the local government code that you can dictate. But a PID is unique in that you can impose assessments within the geographic footprint to pay for certain things within that development, public improvements. And so what the developers like to do, or what they would like in order to maintain a price point on a particular product, is they would like to impose or create a PID upon the property of their development and ask the court to let them impose upon the residents or businesses that locate within that footprint an additional assessment, which functions pretty much just like a tax, but it is incremental revenue that is levied and assessed and collected solely upon the people that choose to live in that footprint. And then you take that money and you use it to supplement their costs that they have to pay for public improvement in order to service that development. Water, wastewater, roads, whatever is required. And then they are able to bring down the per lot cost to a level that can allow them to reach a velocity or an absorption of those lots that makes their project financially viable. And so Medina County was willing to entertain those requests in exchange for certain things, knowing that this is something that would be incentivized. The county had certain levels of minimal development standards that they would impose upon the developers, including minimum lot size, exterior construction materials for the facade of all or part of the outside of the homes, walking trails, parks, things that make a nice neighborhood, and requiring that the homeowners association or some developer-created entity retains responsibility for paying the maintenance cost of those roads. And we built into these now they are public roads, it's a public improvement district, however, the maintenance responsibility is contracted away to the district itself. And so we found that the best mechanism for doing this is a homeowners association. But we do not trust the homeowners association to provide the funding mechanism for the duration. What we don't want to do is lose control after they've collected all the money, they've gotten all the benefit, and then the homeowners association determines that they do not want to impose an assessment on themselves anymore. Well, the county can then step in, because you control the district, and impose an assessment that would then pay for the maintenance where the HOA refused to abide by its obligations. And then you have a funding mechanism in order to pay for the road that is over and above the ad valorem taxes that you're creating. Now, if we think that this is important because you are responsible for addressing issues of public safety, and sometimes you just can't wait for an HOA to come in and do what needs to be done. So we have a mechanism in place not only for ongoing maintenance but emergency type situations so that the county can respond accordingly. So I'm going to pause for a minute just because I've talked about a lot. Is this the type of information that you were hoping to learn about? Okay. Go back. Sure. We can do this as many times as you want. No. And so it is really a learning process. So how does this start? Well, you are probably going to be approached, if you haven't already, by developers that have tracts of land that are in their development footprint, and they're looking for some form of assistance. That's where it starts. And what is the incentive for the local government to participate? Because we have faced plenty of criticism that says that you're just facilitating the development that is destroying the fabric of the community. And why are you in that business? Well, the reason why we're in that business is because we know that at some point in time the development's going to happen regardless of what we do. And this provides a unique opportunity at a point in time to help facilitate the type of development that we think will sustain a quality of lifestyle within the county that, if we leave it to its own devices, might or might not occur. And so we compare this to the property that is developed on the immediate border in far west Bexar County. And so we have homes that are as small as 600 and 700 square feet. We have lot sizes that are 4,000 square feet. We have roads that school buses, when cars are parked on the street, cannot get in to drop off kids. We have cul-de-sacs that are too small for the buses to turn around. We cannot fit emergency response vehicles in there. And so to the extent that, but they are, all of those subdivisions are designed and built to the Uniform Development Code that's been adopted by the city of San Antonio, and that's in their extraterritorial jurisdiction. So we think that if we don't do something, that the invisible line between counties makes no difference between one or another from a market perspective. But if we can tell the developers, okay, we see you're coming, we respect property rights, we want you to have a profitable project, but if we participate with you, would you be interested or entertain a next level development, maybe not an entry level development, maybe a development that is someone's second or third home. And if you do that, here's what we can provide for you. And so there are plenty of consultants that can pencil out the financial benefits of this. We provide this on the legal side. We start with a development agreement between the developer and the county. And we start to flesh out all of the different things that are important to the county. And in our particular county, it is all the things that I talked about. It is interior road widths. It is connectivity between different subdivisions to try and fix solutions, or to fix problems that don't currently have a solution within the county budget. Are you donating sufficient right-of-way or providing for sufficient right-of-way for connectivity between areas of the county that might not be developed today, but could be in 5, 10, 20 years? Once all that property is developed, the difference between an 86-foot right-of-way and a 120-foot right-of-way might have been really nice to have that extra space, 34 feet, back when we platted this out 20 years before. So those are the types of things that we're doing. We're providing cost share opportunities on future incremental revenue to the developers that, we know you don't need a 4-lane divided highway for your property, but you have a budget in place for a 2-lane undivided highway. If we take the difference between what you have to build into your development and what we would like for you to build, and we take that incremental cost, and we'll reimburse you with a 381 agreement over 10 years with the incremental revenue from your development, was that something you would entertain? And we've had extreme success with that. So what we're basically doing is we're having public infrastructure built by the developer who takes the risk of reimbursement instead of the county having to issue debt for the exact same projects and imposing that liability across the entirety of the county's tax base. So we really, with these fundamental, it's these fundamental ideas of new development carrying its own cost and building in a form and fashion that is going to be contributory to the county's development as a whole. We notify developers that we are a willing partner if you meet our criteria. And so we base it in this development agreement. We're upfront with them. We say, the development carrying the cost of the county includes all costs. That includes my cost. And so the developers will pay, they will enter into a professional services payment agreement. At the time they submit an application, they deposit money with the county, somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000, which indicates to us that they are actually legitimate about the development and not asking for a joint venture partner on the backs of the county. So when we get those two things in place, we start negotiation of a development agreement that ultimately results in an approval or action by the Commissioner's Court. And if we have a special district, we commence with the creation process so that they can continue on their development. And so, as I said before, this development agreement is the things that are important to the county, which includes exterior building facades, street width, cul-de-sacs, parks, connectivity, is there a solution, is there a public infrastructure solution that this development can contribute to? And for us, it's connecting roads, it is conduits for greater mobility, connecting major thoroughfares from one to the other, bridges, and those are just some of the ones that come to the top of my mind. And then minimum lot size and exterior building facades. We do this to try and back into minimum value because for the county, you will be in perpetuity benefited if your housing start value is at a higher level of which you can build a base off of. So we would much rather have homes on the ground that start at $350,000 than $150,000 purely for an economic budgetary perspective, because once those homes are in place, because you have required the maintenance of the roads to be undertaken by the district, all of that incremental revenue is now contributing to countywide solutions and not acting as a draw from the revenues that you're already receiving. So that's really the methodology, that's the strategy. We have, I don't even know how many development agreements I have going on right now. We get, because of where we are in the footprint of growth, we're getting calls weekly with people wanting to hear about what we're doing. And if they're looking at property, we're usually their first call. Yes, sir.
So, all right, that's the good news, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have had no one contact me and say, yes, I think that's a good idea. All the contact I've had has been the other side. No, you shouldn't do that. No, I'm not for PIDs. If you do that, you're going to force development to go elsewhere, blah, 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 whatever. So give us a downside of being a PID, having one.
It's administration. I would say, first of all, I would say that I'm not an advocate of PIDs. This is something that we've used as a tool to address the development problems. And most of the developers that come to us, they propose or they ask for. We ask them, if you're coming to the county, clearly you want something from us. What's your preferred mechanism for approval? This is one way that we have used to manage growth, because outside of this, we don't have a contractual hook to the developer to get them to agree to all of these things that they're not required by law to do. And so PIDs require, they can be expensive relative to other tools. The county can always finance infrastructure more cheaply on its own than through an assessment within a limited geographic area. And the county has to take, as a commissioner's court, actions on an ongoing basis. But in exchange for that, you get a lot of control. You get a lot of say into what's going on into unincorporated areas within the county that you would not otherwise have an opportunity to do so. PIDs are, in the last 5 years, have exploded in growth across the state. I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm just saying that it is. I know that PIDs are being done in Comal County. They're being done in Medina County. We've seen them coming up in Kendall County. So if your development goes somewhere else because of the development didn't want to pay the additional cost for maintenance of their roads, or to agree to whatever the county is requiring in order to give them the incremental revenue associated with their development, at least from Medina County's perspective, that's maybe a development that they are not interested in incentivizing anyway. And so, go find the property that lets you do what you want. County will obviously live with it, because if they're legally authorized to do so, that's their prerogative. But so far it's worked for Medina County.
Yeah, and I mean, to carry on with that conversation, we've done some research, and we're finding out that there's a lot of counties that are kind of our size, our type development, that has not been successful and has been a nightmare for them. Mm-hmm. So.
A nightmare, from what perspective?
This is Leanne Hosek. She's our emergency management coordinator who does all our subdivision review and all that kind of stuff. What did you get back from Burnett County?
From Burnett County was, whatever you do, don't do a bid. It's letting the developer get everything developed for free. He's not having to pay the road construction costs, the water improvement costs. It's all being funded by this bid.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would say that is,
Now, is it true, because it is a bid, that the county has to accept the road because they're a public improvement?
you do, but as I said, but the maintenance requirement and the maintenance obligation can be required to be retained by some third party. So I would say that a blanket statement that the developer gets everything paid for is not true, because it depends on the strength of the negotiation at the forefront. And so the way that they work from an economic perspective is we have two different types of PIDs. In Medina County, we predominantly use what are called pay-as-you-go PIDs. And so what the pay-as-you-go, and so what a pay-as-you-go PID does is it requires that the developer front all of the costs of public improvements out of their own financial resources, whether that be private loan, equity, cash on hand, whatever. And then over time, the PID provides a mechanism for cost recovery. Now, you can specify the level of cost recovery. If you want your developers to recover no more than 50% of their public improvement costs, you control that. If you want to give them the opportunity to say, I want 100%, okay, well, you can do that, but here's what we're going to require in exchange for that. But I would also say that the risk of recoupment is the developer's risk and not the county. If the property does not improve on the schedule that they have projected, then the fact that they don't recoup all their expenses, that is their risk, not the county's. And because the public improvements have to be put in place on day one, then you do have the public improvements to whatever standard you've negotiated in a development agreement, which includes your county engineer that they pay for inspecting plans and specifications, as well as installation to be sure that they're installed in accordance with the standard that you've accepted and you've identified as being sufficient. The other thing that I would say is in the other type of PID, the bond-funded PID, where they don't have to pay for anything, there is a mechanism. Now we do predominantly pay-as-you-go PIDs in Medina County, but we do have one bond-funded PID. And on the strength of an appraisal of the property that is developed with all of the infrastructure in place, then the financial markets will allow you to issue debt to pay for a portion of the upfront public infrastructure. So, but there are financial limitations. For example, the appraisal will only support a debt ratio of 3-to-1, which means if you have $10 million of public improvements, you have to have an appraisal of at least $30 million. So what we have found is that for the most part, there is going to be some combination of bond proceeds and pay-as-you-go type costs of the developer to install the improvements. And you would, in this situation, you would go ahead and have, say, for $20 million of public improvements in my hypothetical, $10 million would be available through bond proceeds to pay directly those public infrastructure costs. We would then have in place a reimbursement mechanism for the developer who put up an additional $10 million of their own money. And then after the debt is paid off, if there's any money left over, they get reimbursed for their contribution to their public improvements. Now, what that allows them to do then is because they're not having to put that cost into the lot that's directly passed on to the homeowner, then they can, for the same amount of money, they can develop the lots at a lower cost, put more money into the home, which means that you can drive a higher per home value for purposes of collecting taxes on it prospectively. I will tell you that my group, I don't represent Burnett County, but we do a significant amount of ongoing interface and maintenance with the management and administration of these programs. And I would say that if you didn't have that level of support, you would find them to be completely untenable, because it is a lot of work, not just at inception, which a lot of people will come in and say, here you go, good luck, here are your documents, and here's a binder of documents that thick, go figure it out. It doesn't work. That is a recipe for disaster. But we push as much risk to the developer as we can.
Does Medina County have a PID policy? I wasn't able to find it online.
We don't have a PID policy, and that's by design, and that's actually been my recommendation. I have places where they do have policies and where they don't. And the reason why I don't have a PID policy or recommend a PID policy for Medina County is because things are so fluid. Every single development has a story. And so I will tell you that, for example, this the 3-to-1 leverage ratio that I was just talking about, in our particular bond finance project, the value of the property that the appraiser used was $10,000 per acre. Well, the county judge lives next to the property where this development was going, and he said there are $50,000 per acre contracts completely surrounding that development. So I don't believe the appraisers. He said, we're perfectly fine breaching a 3-to-1 because I know that he's at 20% of the value of that property because of the development that's in the ground. If we had a policy in place we would then have to violate that policy in order to proceed with a project that everybody in the Commissioners Court was fully comfortable proceeding with. So till we get to the point to where we have so much development that is in property that has similar characteristics to where we can put something in place that is uniformly applied, because we are so active in managing the program and the Commissioners Court and the judge are so active in the development and they are so in tune with the development community, we're comfortable not having a policy at this point in time. There's nothing worse in my mind. The only thing worse than not having a policy is not following your policy.
Oh, what's the difference, or go ahead,
No, I just
Yeah.
said the same thing with the regulation.
yes. So talk about the difference between a PID and a PUD.
A pit and a mud.
PUD,
Planned unit development. Planned unit development is it's a component of typically what I see in municipal development ordinances that has a requirement for an engineer to step in and provide you all of the requirements that are consistent with your development ordinance, which have been promulgated by the UDC. In my mind, PUDs are them following the rules that might end up with a product that you're not overly happy with the development. I'll give you an example on this. So, City of Castroville, which is in Medina County, they have a municipal ordinance with 12,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. And so I asked them, why do you have 12,000 square feet? And they said, well, that was the minimum when the town was established in 1845. I said, well, okay, that might still work and it might not. And they said, well, we also have this PUD component in here that if someone does a master plan community and with their engineer submitting a PUD to the city council with all of the different variants checked off, that will allow 4,000 square feet. I said, did you realize that you can have 4,000 square feet within the city proper? They said, well, we never approved that. I said, well, that's what your PUD ordinance says. So planned unit development is really a planning mechanism by which you can put in higher density within a defined geographic area that is independent from what I've seen being the standard provisions for development within the development ordinance. It's a subcategory of it. A PUD is not a specific management regulatory tool like a public improvement district, which gives you powers at the governing level, the Commissioners Court, in order to come in and establish these baselines that are going to be provided and applied against the development as a whole.
so kind of what you inferred maybe is the fact that if you develop a PID, you're going to get higher cost homes. And the counties that you're talking about, Kendall and Medina and Comal, already have higher values than we do here. And not that we're not trying to encourage that type of development, but we have also never seen a subdivision in a single development that's had more than, about 80 homes? There's been a couple that have been in phases that might have gone a little bit over that. So our typical development here is probably in the 40 to 50, maybe 60 homes. So how well will a PID work on that small development?
And they're all in larger acreage tracts, 5 acres, 4 acres, 10 acres.
That's going to be difficult. We are doing some smaller acreage PIDs in Medina County. We're doing some in the city of Lytle right now, which is on the Atascosa, it shares territory with Atascosa County. And that is a higher density development, but the homes there are probably about 200 to 225,000, which in comparison to their historical housing stock of 180 to 190, they're happy with that elevated value. We're doing some PIDs in Medina County for what they call lock-in leaves, where they are high density, sometimes shared walls, but it's people that have a contract for lawns and other services associated with their homes, where they literally lock the door and leave and come back in 6 months. Those are on tracts as small as 20 or 30 acres. But we are able to accomplish those very efficiently because the developers are familiar with the PID process, and the county, we have a template that we can use to where and we're not reinventing the wheel for something that is a relatively small development. I would say that on the developments that you're talking about, you can develop a pay-as-you-go PID type structure, but what would be different in what you described from what the developer could do on its own without your approval? I'm assuming those are all septic tanks. So and you have a minimum number of subdivision of properties below 10 acres where you have a septic tank. If they're compliant with your code and there is nothing really that you're providing them from an incentive basis other than saying, would like for you to impose an assessment on yourself to pay for your roads, you're probably not going to get much traction on that.
And that's kind of where we're at. I mean, because my understanding in Medina County, most of those developments have sewer available to them, because the only sewer plants in this county are the ones that are in the cities.
They actually don't. We had the first development that came where there was a PID that was proposed. The big requirement was that they put a sewage treatment facility, a package plant, on site because it was originally slated for larger acreage lots, the minimum acreage that the county would allow, but 250 of them with septics on every one. And the county saw this as being a significant issue, and that's where negotiations started with the developers saying, if we start incentivizing this, is there something that we can do differently? And so they built a modularized sewage treatment facility that could be added on as things happened around it, with the idea that it would eventually tie into the SAWS system once SAWS came out that far. But that is an example of one where the development had no intention to create sewage treatment and had originally planned as septic, and they turned the trajectory on it on the basis of utilizing these tools.
So there's none of the PIDs in Medina County offer sewer?
Some of them do, some of them don't. We've actually, after that first one had this, we built that in as a requirement that you have to have a sewage strategy that is something other than septic.
And the strategy,
In this case, was to build a sewage treatment facility.
okay, but are they utilizing it, or are they?
They are utilizing it. And they've created 3 PIDs now built off of that singular one. So I guess to answer your question, no, we don't have any PIDs with septic, but that doesn't mean that we had developments that were initially planning septic that we were able to flip them over because of this. So, I mean, I don't know what developers are coming, but 40 developer with a 200-acre tract and is going to do, 50 lots in 3 to 5 acre tracts is really a different model than what we've done. Even in this development, they were half-acre lots, so it was significantly greater density. And we gave them lower lot sizes than what the rules provided, assuming that they tied into a sewer system.
So who operates those sewer systems?
They're contracted third parties, and that's a developer expense. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm the tax assessor
Mhm.
in Wilson County. How does the money side of it work in Medina County? Does it go to the auditor's office, the treasurer's office, the tax office?
It's included on the ad valorem tax bill, and the money comes in just like it does in taxes in the county, and the auditor and the treasurer split it up, and then it goes to they have a separate account that they hold, and they pay bills that are associated with the development out of that account. Specifically, because these pay-as-you-go PIDs are the only ones that are cash flowing so far. The other ones aren't far enough into development to generate the assessments. The money is required to be used to reimburse the developer for actual costs that have been incurred, and that's proving up with all of the engineers' reports and certifications that they've completed what they've said that they would do. We don't relinquish the money until we have proof of that, so we don't pay them in advance for anything. We don't let those monies fund any of their project. It's totally and completely a reimbursement mechanism.
What's the oldest one that you have?
2013.
How many kids in Medina?
Probably 10.
Who's in charge of the account?
Yeah, I wasn't, like, who manages the administrative side to ensure that what's being paid out is?
The auditor's office. And there's an expense, we have an expense mechanism built in. So in order for, on every annual assessment, if we project that expenses for reimbursement are X, we have a component that is added to that to pay for additional costs or efforts by the county for purposes of administrating that PID. And so, if it's $5,000 per PID per year, we think that we're approaching an area to where we would have enough PID residual revenue to support headcount to actually service all the PIDs. So that's the direction that we think we're heading.
I'm a simple country guy. And I've listened to this, and I've missed something somewhere. The issue that I see that we have right now is we've had a lot of growth. We have a lot of new pavement. We have a lot of old pavement that hasn't been maintained. The state limits us to 3.5% new growth in revenue every year. So we're at 3.5%. So we have all of this that comes in. The tax rate goes down a little bit, which is good. But as far as in my budget or any of these other gentlemen's budgets, we get 3.5% new money. Well, in an inflation year, you're behind where you were the year before. Fuel's up, materials up, everything's up. And so the problem is that, you know, I have subdivisions that are 20 years old that need to be redone, and I don't have the money to do it. And I think that probably falls to everyone else. And so the question is, that we're having is, so far we haven't had a problem with growth. We've had a lot of growth for us. We had, how much, 12,000 new citizens, we think, this last decade?
Okay. It's going to be not quite 12,000,
But close.
but
Yeah.
close.
Which is a lot for
We're 42, and we're going to be over 50. So 8,000, 9,000, 10,000.
So the issue is either there's a day coming when somebody's going to have to pay the piper. I won't be here as a commissioner at that point, but the older subdivisions we have, the folks there are sort of used to it. We will get out, we take care of it. The new, I've got a subdivision with a couple of $1 million homes in it. Those folks are not quite the same. You know, if the grass isn't growing right, so to speak, then they want something done. And so if there's a problem, you've got to get out there and deal with it, and that's where we are. And I don't see how that helps, how the PID helps me
It
from
doesn't.
that standpoint.
It doesn't. I mean, those are, and that's the
And
exact.
I wasn't asleep.
No, you weren't asleep. No, this isn't a mechanism for creating or generating additional money so that new development pays for your historical problems. It's not that. What it is a way to pay for new development so that that revenue is not within that development itself, is not put into the roads and the costs that are associated with that new development. So the idea is that over time, you will have a payment mechanism for roads within this footprint, and the component of the tax revenue that's generated out of that footprint that would otherwise be used for roads within that footprint is available to disperse throughout the county.
And not a part of this 3.5% limit?
Well, it's still going to be from an operation perspective. I mean, because from your general fund balance, even the new growth, it's going to come in. When it comes onto the tax rolls, it does not impact your 3.5%. It's only once it's on your tax rolls is it subject to the 3.5% limit. So you're going to get all of that new growth that's going to improve your total countywide AV, and then after it's added, then you'll have a 3.5% limit on a go-forward basis. But the other thing that you're asking me is how do you do a countywide solution out of your general fund budget? You're going to be limited with that, but the other opportunity that you have is you can do some type of a countywide road bond debt issuance and then pick up INS tax, which isn't subject to the 3.5% limit, to do a comprehensive countywide road improvement project.
And I don't disagree with that, but I think the odds of getting that approved by the public
Understood?
are slim, none.
They're tough. They're tough.
Okay,
But back to what you just said, how do you convince somebody that being in a PID is better than not? Because of what you just said, you know, why would I buy a house that's governed by a PID knowing that I'm going to have to pay additional money to maintain my road over and above what I pay in county taxes?
Well, you'll have a higher degree of certainty that your road will get fixed and maintained. You won't have to wait in line with the rest of the county. Typically, it's, at least in our area, and I'm not saying that this is everywhere, but with the number of people that are migrating to the county, there is a supply and demand issue. And so if you have significant numbers of people, I'm guessing that you don't have 1,000 new home starts in your county right now to accommodate an annual 8 or 1,000 or 1,200 people coming in. Maybe you do, but if you have a supply issue where you have amenities associated with the development, proximity to San Antonio, wherever the job center might be, then we find that people are accommodating for that, particularly in the unincorporated areas of the county where you're near San Antonio, you're just on the other side of the city limits or the city ETJ. What the developers view in that circumstance is they have the city of San Antonio tax rate equivalent in order to impose an assessment because they're not in a city. There's no functional difference for people that are a mile down the road that have to pay city tax versus those that live in a PID and pay an assessment that's equal to the city tax. So, there's some geographic issues there. Are we talking about something within the city of Floresville, or are we talking about something just outside the city of Floresville? It's just outside the city of Floresville, whatever their city tax is really the amount of increment a developer is going to look at and say, okay, I can charge an assessment up to, I don't know what it is, 40 cents, 50 cents, and people are going to view that the same. Plus, I can provide you walking trails, playscapes, whatever, pools, amenity centers. That's what we see.
There's not a limit on the amount of assessments that can be charged?
No, there's not, but there has to be functional connectivity between the assessment charged and the benefit derived. So if you have 10 houses with one road that runs in front of them, you have to allocate no more than 1/10 of the cost of that road to each house because they each, in theory, derive 1/10 of the benefit. And so while there's not, that's one legal limit, there is also a practical limit in that most developers look for what they call the all-in tax rate, and that's the combination of all taxes and assessments that they can pay within a market and still believe that they're competitive. And so if they have a property that has a gap between what's actually imposed and what they think they can get away with, they fill that in with the assessment to help build out their project.
How does the assessment work? Say, okay, they do this subdivision, and they start selling lots, people are building houses. How does that assessment work is that something, because of course the appraisal district's gonna have to be notified about it. They've got to add that code to every property.
Right.
But is that an additional tax that
It's-
they're gonna be paying?
It's an assessment, but it functions as a tax. And there's a requirement to update on an annual basis the assessment and project plan that shows every year the Commissioners Court approves it, and it shows what the new appraisal rolls are going to be. And they have the same fixed dollar amount that they then allocate across the new pool of homes, and you pay it on an installment basis up to 30 years. So going back to my hypothetical, if the road costs $1 million and it is 10 houses with $100,000 apiece, then you would put an annual installment over 30 years. That $100,000 divided by 30 would be about $3,300. And then in the event that we ever had a maintenance issue, that would be tacked on top of the $3,300 to pay for the road in front of their house.
And is that something that the tax office collects and then turns over to the county?
Yes.
Just so you would assess it when they make that payment, then that's what we're saying, it goes into a separate fund that treasurer and the auditor would administer. Then in that agreement, it says he's got to come to her and prove that he's got X number of dollars, and then the county treasurer can write the check out of that account.
It would be basically like our old road district.
Yes.
Kind of.
What rules of PID? The board of directors?
You have an advisory committee that you can delegate, an advisory committee that is typically elected or appointed by the developer within the community or within the development itself, and he has the developer and some of his interested parties in development, and you probably have the commissioner in whose district the property sits. And then that advisory committee only has the powers that Commissioners Court delegates to it. Everything else has to come back to Commissioners Court. And there are certain things that you can't delegate. You have to, like, for example, the advisory board can't impose assessments. That can only be done by the Commissioners Court. Can't issue debt. That has to be approved by the Commissioners Court. But you have minimal things that you cannot contract away, but you also have the ability to reserve the right to retain whatever authority you want.
So Commissioners Court would set the assessment rate.
That's correct. That's
Based
correct.
on the information that advisory board provides to you.
Right. And you should have some representative there to understand and believe that what they're telling you is legitimate. So,
On the pay-as-you-go PIDs that you have in Medina County, how often are they paying? Is everybody different, or are they all on the same schedule in terms of payments going out? Is it quarterly, monthly, annually? or-
You mean as far as, as far as reimbursement to the developer? We have them, it's until completion of the development with, they can only submit no more frequently than once a month. And so we could, but that's contractual. If you tell me I don't want to deal with monthly checks or monthly deposits, we tell them quarterly, annually, whatever makes the most sense. But the reality is, if they paid for all the infrastructure, and then assessments are coming in, presumably the assessments are coming in long after they've expended all the money, and you only have one true, you've collected everything by February 15th or February 28th or whatever it would be, you're making the bulk of your reimbursement with that first payment in March because you've collected all your money. And then the only thing that would be left to pay them, whether it be April, May, or whenever, is going to be delinquencies or delayed collections. So it's really one big payment and then a couple of maybe stragglers.
So I guess from a budgeting standpoint, how does Medina County budget for it from year to year?
There's no budget for it. It's paid to the extent of availability versus expenditure that's proven up. So they have to, I mean, because I'll make this up again, but because the development requires $20 million of public improvements, and they'll expend that in 2 years of 2 years of development. Well, that's going to be reimbursed over a 30-year period. So there's really nothing left from a budget perspective. We know what the outflow is going to be. We're limited in the agreement to the extent of collection of funds. We have an administrative expense that's associated with it that's fixed, and to the extent that there's anything after that, it gets paid out to the developer to reimburse themselves.
And if there's maintenance needed within this period of time,
Mm-hmm.
then the rate needs to be changed, the commissioner's
Correct.
court change.
That's right. But the way that would work, and we have the county we have the county's ability to front the costs with it having itself a reimbursement mechanism. Or the county can choose to wait until it adopts a plan that allows it to be collected, and then it will proceed with the maintenance. And the reason we did it that way is we thought that there needed to be a mechanism to deal with emergency scenarios. So you as a county have the combination of upfront with reimbursement or require that the maintenance go on a pay-as-you-go basis. So you could do an inspection and say, okay, that asphalt needs to be recovered in 2 years. So we're going to go ahead and modify our plan, impose the rate, the assessment, we'll collect it, and then when the money's in hand, we'll go ahead and proceed with the expenditure.
But I guess my understanding of what's been going on, at least in Medina County, is you're getting a higher class of road that has a longer design life, and so your maintenance expenses are relatively small during the first maybe even 10 to 15 years.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's
And what
correct.
is- What is the, if you can answer this, and I'm sure there's really not a right answer, but so what's the average size of a pit? Is there, I mean,
I think that's difficult to say. I mean, we've seen them with the total build-out value of 25 to 30 million, and I've seen them with it being 485 million. So, and a lot of times if they get too big, they do them in phases, and it seems to be in that 250 to 350 million total value. Seems to be about the efficiency level.
so that's about a 300 to 400 lot subdivision?
I think that's right.
So can we, I'm a step-by-step person. So can we start at step one? A developer comes to the county and says, I would like to do a PID. So is he creating the PID based on the master plan? Well, not creating, but proposing the PID based on the master plan of potentially 10 units or phases, or just on the one?
It depends. It can be either way. So it is kicked off typically with a notice to the Commissioner's Court or to somebody at the county that they want to create a PID. Then there's a requirement that they file a petition. And the petition by state law requires certain elements: the location of the property, the value of the public improvements, what type of public improvements are you planning. There,
And I forgot to add this. Is that done before they even file a plat?
yes, long before. And so then that typically kicks off the negotiation process. You know, what are you planning on doing? Here's the county minimum requirements for entertaining a PID. If you have a policy, you can give them that to see. But, again, my recommendation, given where you are in the evolution of this, having a policy for what you don't know might actually be desired by the developers doesn't make, in my opinion, a lot of sense, unless you just want to have something to give to people and say, this is it, no matter what your expectations or requirements are. But we start into a negotiation of a development agreement after that. And the development agreement, in order to create the PID, which is a Commissioner's Court action based off of the petition that is filed, we have to have a development agreement in place, because if they're not going to agree to the standards that the county puts in place, then we see no reason to create the PID. Once you have a petition created and you've got a term sheet or an agreement in principle for the development agreement, then you will have Commissioner's Court action to accept the petition. You'll call a public hearing. You'll conduct a public hearing, and then you have satisfied your legal requirements to create the PID until you're ready to bring the development agreement back to Commissioner's Court. And you'll never see that again unless there's a development agreement that's negotiated that whoever's standing up here can recommend approval based on the input that's been received from the court and judge. And so once you do that, the way that we handle this is we have the approval of the development agreement and authorization of the creation of the PID at the same meeting, which is after your public hearings have been conducted. You have to send notices out by mail. You have to publish them in the paper. And then after that, you go on to a subsequent process, and that is the actual imposition of the assessment, which is based on the development providing to you in what's called a service and assessment plan, the anticipated public improvements and the anticipated costs.
And all of that is conducted by the auditor's office, the
No.
publications, the...
No, we handle all of that. No, this.
Who pays for that?
We have them. We have the developer at the time of the petition submission. Before we'll accept it, we send to them on behalf of the Commissioner's Court what's called a professional services engagement agreement. And so we go back and we say, if we're going to act on this petition, we're requiring that you submit $25,000 to $50,000 with the county, and that's to protect the professionals that are doing all of this work. So that if the developer disappears or his project goes south, then your professionals in the county aren't hung out to dry for all the work that's been undertaken, because it is a significant undertaking. If you get down to a minimal amount of money over the negotiation process because it takes too long, you tell the developer you have to deposit more in order for us to keep going. If the developer says this isn't for me, we pull the plug and we refunded them whatever's left. But that way the county's not exposed, the professionals and consultants aren't exposed. But to answer your question, this is we don't turn anything over to the county auditor and treasurer's office, the appraisal district's office, until everything is completed. We copy you on everything so you see what's going on. Any questions that you have to fit it into your existing processes, we help you figure that out, because I do know everybody's a little bit different. But we don't require that you prepare these. We will need to pull the rolls, assessment rolls, appraisal rolls, things like that. But there are consultants that handle all of this, and all those costs are at the developer's expense.
So the ones you got started in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
how much money is in that pit now for the county to repair the roads?
I have no idea. If it's functioning correctly, it would be zero, because the HOA is handling it.
And the county doesn't fix the road, they do.
The HOA does. Mm-hmm. So the only time that we would impose an assessment is if the HOA is not doing its job. And and to your point, their roads are constructed at higher standards because our engineers review all the plans and specs as well as the construction. And we've had people rip out roads before. You didn't do it right, do it again. And so we would only have money collected to pay for maintenance in the event that the HOA has been derelict in their responsibilities under the agreements. And that hasn't happened.
So the HOA has to hire a contractor to go repair the roads?
Yep, and we require in there that the developer, that the HOA, until they have developed their own expertise, they have to hire engineers and consultants to develop budgets and to hire people with experience to do this, and the developer's obligated to fund the HOA with adequate money in order for this to launch until their HOA assessments are sufficient to cover it. So we provide a significant amount of protection for the county to be sure this is done properly.
Does the county have to contribute to the PID?
The county does not contribute to the PID.
You don't have to do anything.
No, you don't.
We're good at that.
There's no apportionment of the cost that the county would be responsible for.
I'm not,
I'm just looking at the statute, and in the petition, it's supposed to state the proposed apportionment of cost between the PID and the county as a whole.
sure, we say 0, 100%.
Okay.
Yes.
That's- yeah.
Mhm.
Do many of these not get past that point where they're created, or you were?
We have some where the developers fall away.
And what is your surmise on how?
That's why I don't represent developers. I think.
No, you said, but I mean,
I think-
you
a lot-
you're in the business, I mean.
a lot of their stuff
because
is-
they probably weren't prepared, or they didn't really understood how this worked, or.
Part of it, it's not
Didn't really have
that,
the money they said they did.
that's the big part of it. The numbers didn't pencil out like they thought they would. The demographics don't support the development that they thought they had. The housing market turns, lumber prices go up. Prices that the entitlements to the property were too expensive. They didn't think that they could get water and sewer. They couldn't get the water rights necessary to service the land, or they lost the political support of their commissioner in the particular area where they planned on going, or they had 3 parcels under contract and they were going to go with the first to close. I mean, it's everything under the sun.
Worst roads I've got, but I can only do so much with what I got to work with.
The
Developer purchases this tract of land. When he does a petition, he's the only owner, so he's the only one that signs the petition.
That's correct.
Yeah. So then, let's review the development agreement.
No, he wouldn't have ever built it.
Oh, he would not, but I'm saying midway
It
through,
is created,
can they pull out during development?
and then
No, I mean, if they went bankrupt or whatever, I don't know, let me
the
ask him.
assessments.
The assessments are imposed at the time that the service and assessment plan is approved. We would adopt either, if you're issuing bonds, you would sell the bonds at that point in time so you could lock in the interest rate, or you would adopt what's called a reimbursement agreement, which is the developer's requirement to satisfy the costs and for the county to reimburse to the extent of availability of assessment revenue, but no other sources of county funds.
Do we have to do that?
That's the purpose for the district. If you didn't have a way to reimburse them, then the answer to that is yes. If you don't have an obligation for reimbursement, then there's no reason to impose an assessment. But I would ask the question is, why would you not? If you have a developer that's on the hook to provide public improvements of X amount, and they're only reimbursed to the extent that they spend the money, then there's really no reason, and the county is only obligated to the extent of the availability of the assessment, then there's, in my opinion, really no reason to not.
So in a way, the guy from Burnett County was right.
Well-
Paying for the developer's expenses.
Yes and no, but, so what happens if they go belly up after they get started?
Riverbend concept. I mean,
I wasn't really having that in mind, but sure.
yeah.
I'll ask.
Yeah, it's a good question, and to me, that's why the risk needs to belong to the developer. If you have a bond finance PID, you have money that is in place that's put with a trustee, and it can only be used for public infrastructure. And the financial markets have accepted the risk of new development coming in an amount sufficient to amortize those bonds, and the infrastructure will be in place, but there would be no money in order to repay the debt because the development never came and there are no assessment revenues. In that point in time, the trustee would foreclose on the developer's interest in the property and would seek to find another developer to come in and finish the deal. But it's all remains subject to your development agreements. The other piece of this, if it's a pay-as-you-go PID, and it doesn't happen, it doesn't proceed, then the county has not been exposed because you have not committed anything except for assessment revenues that are generated by that footprint. And so if their development doesn't make or it gets delayed by 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, then the county should be relatively indifferent other than having a half-finished development over there. So I do put things in my development agreement that says once a phase is started, you can't start a new phase until you've completed the old one. And I say that if there's any cessation of work for more than 30 days, you have to deliver a remediation plan to get everything back and going, because I do know what happens is people will go dark for 6 months or 9 months, and everybody's wondering what in the heck's going on out there. And so we try to do as much as we can to generate communication and conversation, because if they do come to the county asking for something, then we have an expectation of something in return. And communication as to what's going on with your development should be a bare minimum.
Define completion. You said they can't start a subsequent phase until the first phase is completed.
It's the completion of site work and public infrastructure to allow vertical construction. So they have to put in all of the public infrastructure before they can move on to the next phase. Now, whether home builders come and build on those lots, that's really out of the developer's hands once they sell the lots. I do want to just remind everybody that you're not forced to do any of this. This was, I was invited here to give you a sample of what other people are doing, and so
Explain to everybody that you're
Um,
coming to explain this to us. You're not trying to sell it to us.
absolutely not.
Can we ask the state board for continuing education credit?
Certainly, certainly.
Like a class, I've got
Yeah.
to write like that.
Well, it feels like a tough crowd, I'll be honest with you.
Let me ask you a question that has nothing to do with the PID.
Yes, sir.
From what the predicament, I guess you could say, Wilson County is in about having more county roads than we can take care of. Other than a PID, what would be a solution?
Comprehensive road management plan funded by debt. That's your plan.
So go out for a bond.
Yep. And make sure that it's sprinkled across every precinct. That's the only way to get away from the 3.5% limitation.
What about a road tax that would come specifically to
We do not.
the bridge?
We do not. We're working on one because of the traffic issues on the eastern side of town.
So, but because of the development agreement, that's what allows them to maybe have some higher standards required of that development.
Absolutely.
Because by statute, they wouldn't be allowed.
No, it's all by contract.
A road and bridge tax?
Not sufficient probably for what you're talking about. So the debt tax would be out of the 40 cents of the 80 cents that you're allowed. But it wouldn't be subject to the 3.5% limit.
Do you have verbiage in your PIDs that regarding the contractors being audited during the entire period, that the auditor has the ability to audit any of the financial records because you're dealing with, in a way, taxpayer money?
Right.
Associated with the county?
We do have the authorization to inspect all books and records. So you do have access to all of them. And we have requirements that all of the invoices and records that are presented for reimbursement are prepared in accordance with GAAP. And so you can back into all of that and make sure that what they're providing to you is verifiable. And if you don't agree with it, you can ask to inspect further.
And once a PID is created, it stays in effect until it's abolished.
Yes, until the assessments have been paid off. Now, that's the other thing about this. It is finite. Once the assessment has been paid off, then the PID will disappear unless you reassess on a go-forward basis. So if you have a 30-year recovery period at the end of 30 years, unless you reassess, then the PID will absolve on its own or dissolve on its own.
But I guess theoretically, that can't ever happen because there's always going to be some.
The maintenance piece.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mowing the grass,
Right.
fixing the pothole, putting up a sign.
That's right.
Whatever. It may get de minimis after 30 years.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, she asked the question, so the road never becomes the responsibility of the county, and the answer would be no.
Not in the way that we would envision it being structured.
Yeah. So how long have PIDs been in existence now?
Oh, I remember 15 years ago. They've probably been around for 20 years. There was an opinion. Assessments are different than taxes, in that they have a lower place in the hierarchy of lien placement. And there was an Attorney General's opinion that came out probably in 2005 or 6 that said that if you impose the assessment before the home is designated as a homestead, that you can foreclose on that home in order to collect the assessment, which was a real powerful tool from a value of the lien, and that really allowed them to start proliferating. But I would say that their true exponential growth has been within the past 5 to 7 years. And the market right now is extremely robust. And the reason why they've been preferred to special districts like municipal utility districts or MUDs or WCIDs is the development plans for water and wastewater aren't subject to TCEQ approval. And so you can save significant engineering costs and time by not having to go to the TCEQ if your cost recovery mechanism is a PID instead of a MUD or a WCID or an FWSD or something of that nature.
How does the PID work between the city and the county? You got ETJ, they.
Yep. Well, you have the ability to create a PID, either the city or the county. If it's within the city or the city's ETJ, you have to give notice to the city, and they have the opportunity to object. So, there are some inner-city PIDs. We're doing one in the city of Sinton right now. To your point earlier, I think that's very difficult because now you do have people within the city that are paying full freight of all taxes, and they are paying a PID assessment on top of their city taxes. But developers think they can pull it off. So, more power to them.
Maybe if the city objects in the ETJ?
Then you can't create it.
The city has the right to object in their ETJ,
Mm-hmm.
not just a home rule city.
No, I'd have to check the statute to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that it says, is it just a home rule city?
That's the way I read it.
Well, who is the city, is a home rule city here?
Lawrenceville,
Yeah.
and that's.
Yeah, I think it would be a home rule city. So general law, you could do it in their ETJ.
So they could just object because they wanted to.
They could. But I would, if I'm giving advice to a developer and it's in the ETJ, I would say don't even come here until you have the city on board. I mean, why wouldn't you? I don't want to do all that work and then have the city object.
We got one right now where the cities reject.
Yeah. Have I answered your questions?
Okay, a board appointed by
Commissioners Court.
developer, you say?
Well, the developer makes recommendations, but it's appointed by the Commissioners Court.
Okay.
How soon does that board get appointed? Because if that PID, when that PID is established, if it's just one piece of property
Mm-hmm.
before that plat is filed,
It's not going to be homeowners in the development. It's going to be people because, frankly, the developer doesn't want to deal with other people uninterested in its development plan while it's in development.
So he's going to appoint somebody that has a auditing or financial background.
It's probably going to appoint. It depends on the sophistication of the developer. Probably his daughter, friends, maybe an investor, and that's why we think it's important that you have some member of the court that's involved. They can be the liaison and the straight man or woman to make sure that what they're telling you is legitimate.
Get you some of that, Gary.
Say
thank you.
you have a 100-acre development, and if you had 100 homes, it would work pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
What is, how big of lots can you get before it starts getting to where it's not?
That depends on all the economics of what the developer's trying to do. I haven't seen any multi-acre lots in a PID. Well, I take that back. We actually do have one in Medina County, and I think the lots are up to 5 acres. And that one, they seem to be doing fine. It's a cost recovery mechanism for the developer. He had his spend, and if he gets anything back in the assessments, he's okay with it being multiple years down the road. But he was pretty well heeled to go into it, and I think this was just a sweetening incentive for him. And we were able to extract some limitations on, how his development went and roads and whatnot. And there are other things that we can do. We've become very cooperative in the county. We look out for the school district. Are you setting aside property to build a new school? Are you communicating with them? Just like I said, don't come to us if you haven't talked to the city. Don't come to us if you haven't talked to the school. And we want to make sure that what we're doing to incentivize development is being cognizant of all of the different political subdivisions. Have you talked to the ESD to make sure that they're comfortable they can get their fire trucks in there? That's something that we can do that we couldn't do otherwise without this mechanism.
So how long approximately is that entire process before the PID even gets approved and they start developing?
It depends. Developers, their activity towards any particular project seems like an accordion. Sometimes it's hurry up, we need this yesterday, and then we don't hear from them for 2 months. So in the bond financed PID that we did for Medina County, when I got involved, they said we need to issue bonds by April. Well, we did. It was just not the original April we'd intended that we were going to issue the bonds. And so, some of these have been 2 years, and some of them have been 6 months. It just depends on how consistent everybody is towards these common goals. And they're not easy. And usually, I say that in jest, but they're communicating with San Antonio Water System, and they're talking with CPS Energy, and they've got a lot of different entities that they need in order to build these types of developments. And plan and design and engineering that is a long lead project. And before we can figure out what costs they need, they have to have all that work done. There's financing that's associated with it because we're making them pay for everything. They have to make sure their private financing is acquired and is sufficient. So it does take a while.
Is there an advantage or disadvantage over a pay-as-you-go or a bond-funded?
I think that bond-funded, in my mind, it requires a heightened level of sophistication, attention to detail, crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Not that you aren't doing that anyway, but when the federal government, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Internal Revenue Service are involved, I'm going to probably document things to the nth degree that I'm not on a pay-as-you-go PID. We always talk about this as attorneys. We draft to protect against the 10,000-year flood. On a pay-as-you-go, I'm probably protecting against the 2,000-year flood.
Are there the IRS reporting requirements annually with PIDs like there are for?
Not on an annual basis. I think you might be talking about arbitrage calculations. We have to file 8038s.
No, it's a form, I don't remember the form off my hand, but I'm just talking about like the,
Continuing disclosure?
no, what am I thinking of? The annual audit report that we're required to file with the IRS for the Riverbend project. The TIF, yes, thank you. So by statute, we're supposed to be filing an annual report, right, of all expenses, all monies going in. Is that required from an IRS perspective if you get a bond, if it's a bond funded?
If it's tax exempt bond, you will have to file your 8038 at the time of closing, and you'll have to calculate your arbitrage and rebate analysis within 5 years of issuance, but you won't have to do any other ongoing reporting. You will have to do.
The county would have
The
to?
county would. It's your debt. And the county would also have to provide your continuing disclosure as you do with your other publicly marketed debt under the SEC Rule 15C212.
Well, with that said, how would that affect our bond rating?
It wouldn't. It's different credit, completely different. So the credit is solely limited to the assessments within that footprint. Your bond credit rating is predicated on your ad valorem tax base within the county, so it doesn't impact them at all. Your risk, just like it was in Riverbend, is headline risk. If another development went south in Wilson County.
So it won't affect the way we calculate tax rates?
No.
You don't have to calculate a separate tax rate for it?
No, it's not a tax. It's an assessment.
An assessment,
Who
they do
calculates
that.
the assessment?
The PID consultant, the third-party financial, the party that is paid for out of the PID assessment to do that exact thing, to update your annual plan to calculate your rate.
I've Bet you're glad to hear that.
Yeah. That made me excited.
Yeah, and I guess, so is that assessment based on lot size, house size, value of, or how is that?
All of the above. It depends on what the composition of the development's going to be and what a fair and defensible allocation of the costs are to the homes. They say that, a larger square footage home is going to by definition have more traffic, so you can disproportionately allocate the cost to larger homes. If you have commercial versus residential, there's some formulas that say how you benefit a particular arterial, but that's for the financial people to do. That's not my purview.
Yeah, so if I had a 1,000 square foot house and it was just me and my wife being retired versus the guy down the street with a 5,000 square foot house, 6 kids, 10 cars, 2 boats and all that other stuff, so he would pay way significantly more than
You would.
I would.
Correct.
So do they drill that down to the number of occupants of the house?
It's based on square footage.
Just all based on square feet?
Mm-hmm.
So don't build a big house.
No, I'm not gonna be in a PID, so you don't have to worry about me.
What's the average price of a lot in Medina County where the PIDs are?
Oh, 80,000,
Much?
$75,000 to $80,000 per lot.
We got them over 100,000.
Well, 6,000 square feet.
We are.
Yeah. So, and then you figure, I mean, the rule of thumb is that the end product is 4 to 5 times the value of the lot. So a $100,000 lot, you're looking at a $400,000 to $500,000 end product. So, mm-hmm.
More.
Going back to that advisory board, so initially, the only persons that would be affected by the proposed assessment that would be on the board would be the developer. Can that advisory board change every so often?
It can.
It would have to meet the requirements of the statute.
It would.
Could it ultimately be the HOA?
It could.
So that could be one and the same?
Mm-hmm.
So there is an actual HOA in addition to having this advisory board?
There is.
They would have to have an HOA.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. That's how the maintenance would work.
right.
Well, okay, yeah, I didn't think about it. But so is all of it's all a PID assessment then? If they had a park and, other stuff, the HOA wouldn't assess for like park maintenance and,
They could. I mean, it would be, and for the one with the most robust maintenance agreement in Medina County, the HOA is responsible for park maintenance, storm drainage maintenance, road maintenance, common area maintenance. And so if the HOA is not performing any of those, including keeping trails clean and storm drainages free of debris, then the county can step in and take care of all of that and essentially bill the PID and recover those costs through assessments on a go-forward basis.
so is that in the initial agreement or?
Yes.
What pushes the contractor, the construction, to seek a PID or whatever? Like right now, all they do is go out and buy a piece of land.
Typically, the cost of the public infrastructure in order to deliver the lots that they anticipate. So going to your example of $100,000 lots. Well, let's say, for example, that you're going to have a $30,000 per lot cost of public infrastructure on top of that $100,000 lot. Well, now your $100,000 lot just became a $130,000 lot, and you have 500 of them. And so your product, in order to make your metrics work, is now instead of a $500,000 house, it's a $650,000 house. And they don't think that this is a market for $650,000 houses. So they would seek a PID to drop down that per lot cost and then recover that $30,000 of public infrastructure improvements through an ongoing assessment, instead of it having to be in the upfront cost for the home.
So what will we have to put in place to get this started?
Well, you need to, as developers are approaching you, you have to let them know that it's something that you'd entertain. But you're not going to go out, I don't think, and recruit
Right.
people to build developments with a PID structure. It's a completely reactive mechanism. So if you want to be proactive in your issues that you talked about, it's, something that you've got tools, you just need to be, is that something that you want to pursue? So, but it's not that. It's not a PID.
So since this is an assessment, not a tax, if they have a mortgage, is that rolled into their mortgage payment or no?
It can. They can, a lot of these require that they escrow them as well. So, now, I do hate to say it, but I need to get going.
Sorry we kept you so long.
Sure, no problem. I hope it was helpful. I wish y'all luck.
No, thank you for coming over, and taking the time
Appreciate
to
the
talk
time.
to us. It-
Certainly.
It helped educate us.
Have a great day.
Thank
Too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Briefcase.
Clay?
Oh, catch him.
He'll figure it out in a second. Yeah.
Benford's his name. Okay. Well, we have any discussion on any of this?
Well, I would like to take a minute.
Thank you.
To talk about, I mean, we can have it, you've got it on the agendas, PIDs and county roads, so I'm assuming we are safe in talking about county roads in general? Is it good with that? Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we're trying to figure out what our options are, right? What
Yes.
can we do? What can't we do? So, I mean, I agree that, the road bond thing is something we could do, but like everybody else, I don't think it'll happen.
Well, you know that on our external audit, it was noted from the external auditor about us not having whether you call it a unit roadway system or a long-term projection plan for roads, and hiring somebody who works for all 4 precincts to do all that. Is that, what's the opposition of doing something like that so that we fall with? In our,
One thing about a unit road system, we can't create it in Commissioner's Court. It has to be done by petition and election. And we have to have somebody, like last year, there were some people that got started working with a petition to try to get it going, and it fizzled out.
Because don't you probably have to have 10 or 15% of the registered voter signatures?
I forget how many it is. It's a certain number of the,
But does anybody think that'll fix our current problem?
no.
The old roads? I mean,
One thing.
still don't have the money to,
Money will
fix the
fix our
roads.
problem.
Yeah.
We just haven't got any.
we just haven't figured out where to get it.
Because you've got people, if you get a unit road system, you're gonna have the same problem. You only got so many $1,000 to spend on the roads. It's not gonna give us any more money.
Right.
No, the only thing it would potentially give you is a consistency.
That would be
We
it, yes.
have 2 new commissioners who have brought a lot to the county, who have a knowledge that makes a difference. You have some dumb guy like me elected that gets into it. You spend most of the first year just figuring out what the heck you're doing and how to do it right. And then once you get that figured out, you take it forward. But occasionally, we get a commissioner that maybe isn't all that interested in roads, and then you've got roads that are neglected until the next guy comes along. So that's what it brings you. It brings you consistency throughout the county. They don't say, boy, the roads in precinct 2 are wonderful. Why are the roads so bad in precinct 4? Well, you got a new commissioner over there, and he's trying to figure out,
well, and I think it also helps with a long-term strategic plan for all of the roads so that at any time, anyone could go and say, okay, regardless of how much money we have, but at least we know that this much money is allocated for this road, and we can plan ahead for future roads based on the money that we do have, and even if money.
That would be each commissioner's job for their precinct.
Right, but they're not doing it now for reporting purposes.
So when y'all said it wouldn't save the county any money, would you still need all of the equipment? Because right now, each of you have separate equipment that you have to.
You're still gonna need the equipment.
You could potentially lose some, but not a lot, because you still
We
have.
only have one oil truck for the whole county.
Yep,
And one chip.
You have one chip spreader to spread the gravel
for
for the whole county. So we're not overburdened with a bunch of equipment that's not needed.
They've been good since I've been here about sharing
Yeah.
equipment.
We do.
Or two precincts going together and
Well, no,
buying.
well, yeah, that's their perception, but it's just like, the perception in court the other day was, well, my road's horrible, but don't raise my taxes.
Yeah.
So what do you want? Do you want low taxes or do you want a better road? To me, it boils down to that. However you get the money, whether you do the road and bridge district or you go through certain areas, and see if they want to, like Lake Valley did years ago. But, you've seen what's happened to that. It was formed, they got their road, and now they're,
Right, there's been
Yeah.
multiple road districts over the years.
right, exactly.
Karnes
Exactly.
County had a real problem with it at first. And I think they probably got it figured out now. They have,
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
Says our Karnes County resident.
there you go.
Speaking of Lake Valley, lady approached me earlier today. Went out there, we're working on Lake Valley Road. She said, is there any way that y'all can help us? They've on one of those private lanes that never got accepted into the county. And there's honestly a hole there that you can lose a compact car in. And I told her, I said, it wasn't accepted into the county. I can't come out there with county equipment. And she said, well, if we get a contractor to get the road up to county standards, would y'all accept it? And I said, it'd have to go before court. Is that correct?
Yes. And it would be difficult them to get it up to standards.
Well, and that, I was gonna say, this must be the road day, because I had a similar call from another folk, or a couple of folks that live on a private lane. And it's like, I'll look into it, but,
Now, she claims it wasn't disclosed when she bought the home, and she.
yeah. Well, that's always the problem. And see, in my case, this was a whole bunch of family, did it, and she said, well, how much would you need? And I said, well, I don't know, our current standard's 70 feet, so we'd probably have to have at least 50. Well, we can't do that because people built right up on the edge of the easement for the 30-foot that's there. And I said, well,
Well, the current standard is any new roads that are added to the county have to be paved.
right. Well, exactly. And it has 70-foot right-of-way width, isn't it? If I remember right, yeah, 70-foot wide, and they'd have to have the 8 inches of base and 2 courses of chip seal. And
I think we all have several of those, and it's sad for the folks, but
yeah, it is.
So this PID, I don't see will help us at all.
Only on the new subdivisions going forward, it may help us down the road, but in the immediate future, no, it's not gonna help us at all. A road tax would help us more than anything, but getting that passed would be,
slim and none.
My
And they
concern
might.
is stopping it, slowing it down. We don't need no new development. Not that we don't want new subdivisions. We don't need no more new roads.
I don't really want the Wilson County to be responsible for more roads. I don't want to stop the development.
Right.
no, because then if your county's not growing, you're dying.
That's it.
I mean,
We're
that's just-
growing because we're staying up with that 3.5%.
I understand nobody
That's-
wants more roads to take care of, but you can't just stop the growth because that's our only revenue. Where else are we
That's
gonna
it.
get any revenue from? We don't have any industry.
That's it.
I mean,
Well,
that's.
we don't
the
have
only-
a sales tax to help us if we had industry.
Yeah,
But we're limited to 3.5% regardless of the amount of new growth that we have within the
Now,
county.
everybody go give your legislature a good hug next time you see them.
That's success.
Tell 'em thank
Suggest
you.
Maybe something other than a hug.
And give your lieutenant governor a great big old kiss.
He hadn't tested positive, has he?
Yeah, the short answer is the PID doesn't help us today, it helps us in the future. Because as you're,
Well, should we start looking into that?
well, I mean, if we have some offers, but, I have some other questions. And I've been talking to Catherine to make sure I understand exactly how the statute applies to the county roads. And so I've asked her some questions that she's working on getting answers to, because to me, one of the biggest things that we can do if they're not in a PID, and it is, if it doesn't have an impact to us on the existing county roads, which is what the question is, we need to change the design standard of the road and make it have a minimum design life and have them build us a better road from the beginning.
Can we not change the minimum standards to our,
Well, we
Roads
can,
in
but that's the
subdivision?
question, and we need to make sure that we can do that without having an
if we
impact to
think that
us.
our roads standards aren't good enough, and that's why these roads are failing in a shorter amount of time, why can't we revise the standards?
We did. We revised them.
How would you change it?
But are you gonna want to revise the standards for the roads in the subdivision and all the other roads built by the county?
Any new roads that
Any new
are built. I mean, you can't go back and rebuild all of the county roads. If we did, we'd have the money to solve the problem.
Yeah. So the existing inventory of roads would be at a different standard. We did that 2008, 7, 9, somewhere in there. We went through and identified what the standard was going to be. We changed the width of the road. We added more material to the road. It may be time to take a look at that again. Maybe we need more base.
Yeah, because, right now, basically, the design life of a double-course chip-sealed road realistically is 5 years. So unless you're planning to go in there and fog seal it and keep up with it and do what you need to do, that's it. So I'm saying, raise it to 20 or 30.
What do we need to do? Go to a hot mix asphalt
Well,
instead of a chip seal?
there's several ways to accomplish that. We can either do that, or you could have the engineer that's the developer do geotechnical work and come up with a pavement design that's reviewed by the county engineer. Because we have one standard for clay, sand, black dirt, silt, you name it. It's the same standard across the county, and that may work in some places and not in others, and it may be too much in some and not enough in others.
Well, and
But
you
they do have to pass a compaction test.
Well, yeah, but that's only good the day you take it, and see, the problem is when that standard was updated in 08, 09, back in that age, we were just beginning to get trash trucks coming through here. Double course chip seal on 8 inches of base is not enough to hold up the trash trucks and the amount of semi-traffic and the school buses and et cetera, that we have today, and that we're gonna continue to have.
Well, at a minimum, I'm just thinking of my subdivisions. We got Rosewood. I've got a main street that's like 3 miles long,
Yeah.
and little arteries off of it. The standards for a main street like that should be higher than the arteries. The arteries ought to be at a level, but that gets a lot of extra. But you're right, school buses and trash trucks
Well,
tear up more culverts than anything else in the county.
the cement
Oh,
trucks.
cul-de-sac, sorry.
construction, all that.
Cement trucks that are going down the arteries to build the houses.
Yeah.
18-wheeler load of lumber that comes in.
Yeah.
For every house that's built in there.
I've got an issue in Cibolo Ridge. I drove the newest, or Phase 3, the last phase, last week. They've destroyed that road. That road is absolutely destroyed. And it's the contractors that are coming in and building the houses. They're unloading bobcats. They're twisting most of these bobcats are now tracks.
Yep.
And those track
They lock 'em
machines
and
are.
spin around.
Spin around, and they're just rolling that chip
That's the
seal up.
problem we have.
Had a roll-off dumpster guy unloaded one of those big roll-off dumpsters in the middle of the county road
Yeah.
and
Well,
tore it up.
And part of
How
that,
do we stop that?
Have we
Well-
already accepted that last phase of Cibolo Ridge?
yep. Well, but part of that is, I mean, we ought to be able to
And
strengthen
that's all
that
happened
standard
since I went out there and inspected it and accepted it.
and increase the bond amounts or make the bond amounts longer. And then we can lay out, you'll have a post-construction inspection and then, you know, and maybe you make them keep the bond until every house or sold
We
or
release the
built.
bond when we accept the road, correct?
Yes,
Let's
No.
wait.
no.
You get one,
They
you
have
get
1 year.
What, a
one
year?
year.
A
Maintenance.
year after we accept the road.
But if they don't build all those houses in a year and the last guy comes in and he's the one that tears it all up, you've got no recourse because you have no bond. But if you build a better road, part of that problem goes away. But I mean, I think there's some other mechanisms that we can look at to reinforce our ability to get these guys in better
I
shape.
think that we ought to have hot mix asphalt that's much tougher instead of the chip seal is just,
How
it's
much
too,
more expensive is it?
it's quite a bit more expensive.
That's the reason that.
But it holds
We're
up
using
longer.
chip seal road is you can build more road and make a few more people happy. But like you said, I understand that
I'm
it's
saying
not
for
gonna last
the
as long.
developer
Yeah. hopefully
on the
it don't.
new subdivisions.
But if we do that, we're supposed to build our roads to the same standard.
Well, and that's the
Require
question.
them to
But
do.
I'm not,
But
we're
that's
not
the
building any
question.
new roads.
And that's, because Catherine and I talked about this morning. There's a difference between if we were to open a new road. We're not doing that. All of our roads are existing.
our
So that's what I'm asking her to clarify and make sure that as long as we don't have an impact to our existing roads and how we construct and build our roads. Now,
What if we improve a road?
well, that's the question. That's the question.
If you have a road that's a base covered road and you chip seal it, then do you have to take it to the full level of new construction?
Can we just put it, impose it on new subdivisions?
No, it's a state law. You can't require a developer, and and this is what she's looking at. I believe the statute says that you can't require a developer to build any higher class road than what the county constructs for a new road. We don't build new roads. So that's the part of it that
I
she's,
don't think new road is in the statute now. It may be implied in some of the cases.
yeah, and that's what she's got to do is look at the case law and see if
How do
there's
we
any.
stop these contractors from tearing these roads up before we ever accept them?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. They're working out in Archstoke. They're supposed to, for lack of a better term, chip seal tomorrow. I suggested to them, put one course down and then don't put the second course down until y'all, because they're planning on, they said they've already got a lot of the lots sold and what have you. I don't know. That was I make that recommendation to everybody that's put in a road in my precinct.
We could lengthen the time of the bond.
Well, yeah, exactly. We can lengthen the time of the bond. We could require additional intermediate inspections. We could require them to maintain the road till the subdivision is built out. There's I think a lot of things that we could do to help make sure that when we do accept the road, that it's in the best shape that it can be.
So in this 1 year period, now that I know this road has been completely destroyed in the last 2 or 3 months since we accepted it, what do I do? Just when that year is up, I say,
Nope, you probably need to get with Leanne and
So you gotta
Catherine and,
cash in on that bond.
yeah. Tell them, hey, this road is in horrible shape and,
I couldn't
Bring it
belie- I
back
couldn't
to
believe
the
it.
standard.
I couldn't believe it from the time I went out there when we inspected, 'cause I had the county engineer come out with me and inspect the road. They had some blockage in the culverts and stuff. They cleaned that out, some sand, they washed it out. We thoroughly went through and inspected the roads, and they were in good shape. And when I drove through there last week, I was absolutely shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Before we release the bond, have the engineer go out there and assess the damage, give us a price on it, and we'll release what's left of the bond, if there's any left over.
The developer is Larry Gimbler and Friesen.
yeah.
And that's
I
the
mean-
subdivision also, we're having issues on drainage.
See, and I've also got Hidden Ranch. I mean, they actually have a letter of credit instead of a bond and
No, we have an escrow agreement.
or escrow agreement, excuse me. So we've already sent them a letter if they want their money back. And I mean, they're steadily running out of time and they haven't even responded. And they've got a lot of things to do. in there before we'll release that escrow. So,
We'll either hold the
He's
bond
all for
or.
himself.
hold the letters,
If they
or,
repair,
Once it's done, it's done.
well, we don't, it's not a letter of credit, it's a bond, correct?
You know,
it depends.
On which
I
one?
know him
Cibolo Ridge.
too well.
Letter of credit,
My son and I have
letter
done
of credit.
quite a bit of work for him.
Okay, before it's released, the road will be repaired back to its
And
original
that's what we've
state.
done in the past, and I'm trying to think, we had something not too long ago. Is it Western Way or the settlement? One of them had some issues. And, that's why we try and get them inspected, like, 2 months before it's set to expire, do that final maintenance inspection. So if there are issues, they're told at that time it's not gonna be released, or if these aren't gonna be fixed, you're gonna have to extend that bond.
is 1 year standard throughout the state?
I
I-
don't.
I thought you might know.
Or it's one, our regs require them to construct the roads in 1 year,
Right. And then we've got another
a year of maintenance.
a year of maintenance.
1 year of
What I'm
maintenance.
asking is 1 year of maintenance a standard? Could it be, I mean, it
It
could,
doesn't say.
if it's 2 years, you've got a better,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, according to, when we had our regulations review, we don't have authority to do a maintenance bond. See, we used to, under the old regs, we have a 1 year construction bond and a 1 year maintenance bond. And we were told by the law firm that reviewed them, there's no statutory authority to require a maintenance bond. So that is why they have a 2-year, bond or letter of credit, whatever the financial guarantee may be. It's 2 years for the full amount. So we used to do a 1 year construction and then a reduced amount for the maintenance.
so we need to do a
Now it's 2
3-year.
years for the full amount.
So it probably needs to be a 3-year. I don't know how that would go across.
Well, I guess that's another question we need to get answered, is what authority do we have on bonds, and how can those be imposed, and is there a time restriction, or can we not do
Okay,
a
I think we're
maintenance
getting
bond?
off of our,
Yeah.
No, this is county road maintenance. This is county,
oh, county road, okay,
we're
good.
talking about county roads.
Okay, another issue is some of these guys are not buying driveway permits, they're buying septic permits, they're not buying driveway permits.
That's the big issue we got.
And they're putting driveways in without culverts. I go out and jump them about no culvert, and they say, well, how do I know if there's supposed to be a culvert? I say, where's your driveway permit? My what?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I talked to Mr. Baker about that a little bit the other day, and we need to go back and revisit what that is and come up with a better plan. The other side of that issue is they don't have the staff to inspect them, and sometimes we have the time and sometimes we don't for ourselves or somebody from our crew to go inspect them. But, I mean, I'm experiencing the same thing. I would certainly, in that driveway permit, like to see what either the recommendation of the commissioner for that precinct or whatever, because I've got roads, just like y'all do, that may or may not have a culvert, that should have a culvert, and that driveway really needs a culvert. And, there's just.
I've got one contractor mad at me. I made him saw cut the concrete driveway and put a culvert pipe in. He said I didn't have the authority to do that, and I said, well,
Yes, you
you
do.
have. So I said, if you'd had your permit, it had on there what size culvert pipe you should have installed, then you would have known, and you wouldn't be out there cutting your concrete driveway.
We really
And
need,
they know they need the permit, he's just ignoring it? or
I
do we
told
have
him,
to-
he's a builder, so he should know what permits that he needs.
Well, but, I
He
mean,
laid it off on his septic guy. He said, oh, the septic guy goes and gets the permits. I
problem
said,
is,
you're the
Kathy,
builder.
Most of these guys don't get the permit till after they build a house.
yeah.
We need to require to get that permit before they put one stake in the ground.
Well, and ideally, we'd have somebody out of Edwin's department that would be out inspecting all of those.
There, it's just,
How do you enforce it?
if you don't have somebody driving around?
Yeah, I mean, you got,
Yeah, I don't have the time to drive around all
No.
those
No, and that's what I'm saying.
But
and I don't have the staff to where I can have somebody drive around. We need someone with that responsibility. If that means kicking up the cost for a permit to help cover the cost of that individual, then we ought to take a look at that.
I think that's something we need to study this year and look at that and change the driveway standard, probably up the price of the permit. And I
If
don't know
you
if
had
we can
one
impose.
person that was driving and checking all of these subdivisions, and that was his job, he could probably get that done.
He'd be a busy boy,
He'd be busy,
but that'd be
but
his
it'd be better
job.
than what we got now, because we don't have anybody checking.
Well, and see, and if you're not pouring concrete, there's no requirement to notify anybody that you're doing anything.
what do you mean?
There's nothing on that permit, when they issue that permit, that says, it just says on there, if you're gonna pour concrete, call 24 hours in advance. It doesn't even tell you who to call.
Well, they need to call the commissioner.
Well, I know they do need to, but it's not on the permit. So if you don't know who to call, who are you gonna call? Nobody, probably. And I mean, personally, I think each one of us ought to at least initial or something on that permit so we know what's there, what the culvert size is, what the basis for determining that culvert size is. You know, in the platted subdivisions, it's on the plat. But if you're out on County Road, pick one, you know, who's determining what size that culvert needs to be?
Commissioner,
Why?
that's the way it's been.
So,
I mean,
Not
that's just the way
necessarily make it
is.
right. I mean, you may know what to look for, I may not know what to look for. You know, what we need is a standard for that and an individual to enforce the standard with the authority to say, no, you didn't do it right, cut it out, like you said,
and do it over again.
and do it over.
See, in the platted subdivisions, we can do that, because it's on the plat, whatever it is, and if they didn't put one in, we've got teeth in it, but for the rest of them, we don't. That process needs to be greatly improved.
Well, and you get back to, you get a new elected commissioner, maybe they have the skills that the two of you brought, but maybe they don't have the skills. And so if you're throwing that back to the commissioner, then you got a commissioner that's trying to figure out how to walk.
Well, and the area is so big,
Yep.
with as broad as our duties are, there's no way that the commissioners can get around and check all of this.
No.
That's why we need to look at a person to inspect or check.
Are you volunteering? Is that why you raised your hand?
So, I don't know if y'all would be willing to do something like this. If if someone is hired, an additional person is hired, and that's gonna be their sole job, driving around. If they find, and I don't know, Kathy might have to see if this is even something we could do, if they come across, they come across the property, somebody's doing some work out there, pull up to the site and say, okay, show me your permits. And if they don't have any permits, they call our office, hey, y'all have any permits turned in on this address? The girls find nothing, then we would make note of that, and that permit fee would be an additional fee because it was not gotten
Yeah, double
prior
it.
to construction,
Double it if they don't get it before they
Yeah.
start construction.
but I don't know if we can do that.
Well, that's what,
If we could legally do it,
They,
then we
they
need.
think because they're building out here in the country that they don't have to follow any rules.
Right.
And there's nobody enforcing the rules, so they're getting by with it.
Yeah, we would have to define what is considered.
And these are just
construction.
issues that I'm seeing that are reoccurring,
Yes.
and they're not getting any better.
You don't get your permits before you start construction, you pay double the fee.
Maybe Edwin needs another person that could be designated to check these or could help with the septic and the driveway inspections. I don't know.
I think maybe so.
There's enough work in the whole county just for driveways.
Yes, for one
especially
individual.
right now, the way we're going.
And being a
We may
busy
not need
guy
it
or gal.
4 years from now, but right now we do.
This first one need to have
Well, if we
the,
stop accepting county roads
That's
and they
exactly
quit
right.
developing, we won't need anybody.
There you go.
That's what I want. Don't accept any more roads.
well, but at the same time, you want somebody to make certain that the roads that are built, even though we don't maintain them,
Yeah, even
and the
if you don't
drainage is
accept
the
them, we
drainage
still want them to be-
that it should be.
Yeah, we would still do that. They would still have to be built to county
I mean, if we don't accept the road, does that mean we don't accept the
If we don't
drainage?
accept them, they still have to build them to our standards?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's what all the other counties do that are
Yep.
not accepting roads. Medina County, Burnett County,
Well, they're accepting county roads.
not Burnett County.
Not Burnett County. They're not accepting no roads.
And I thought Medina County wasn't accepting.
No, they're still accepting county roads. I was thinking Burnett County did too.
No.
But I know Medina, because I got what, that Commissioner Sitter,
Setter, yeah, whatever his name is, yeah.
and they don't, the PIDs are encouraged, but
Or the
They don't
bids
have it
worth
to where-
with all of the extra paperwork and
It's all about how you get your money. That's really what it's all about. But see, I mean, and that's kind of been my thought all along is this is working well for 2 and 3 and 400 and up home subdivisions, and we just don't have that. I don't know if it's an economics of scale.
I'll tell you from my observation, if you don't have a guy as sharp as that man that was here talking to us a while ago, you're gonna be in big trouble.
Yes.
He knew his stuff. He knew his stuff.
you know, if you've got a 300-acre subdivision and you've got 75 lots on it, it's different than having a 300-acre subdivision and having 300 lots on it
Exactly, or more.
Yeah.
or more.
And that all goes back to the design standard for that road and Larry's point of, well, maybe the main road in there needs to be a little better than the side roads, because, yes, as long as it'll support the garbage trucks in the construction period, but it's not gonna see that every day like the main road in and out of that subdivision, using Rosewood as an example, that 3.5 or 3.25 miles, whatever it is,
Rosewood or Brigo Lake.
the Brago
I mean, it
Lakes.
goes on and on and
Right.
on, the main road.
Well, and the other thing we got, like Larry's got these Triple R Ranch subdivisions, but they're all dumping out on County Road 319. Guess what 319 is? Falling apart.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and if we, the
That's
next
an argument
update
for a
to our
unit road
regulations,
system.
if we were to
I said, that's an
require
argument for a
traffic
unit road
impact
system, so
analysis
that you don't have a boundary to where one
That's
commissioner
where they
does
do
this.
that traffic study to
But
determine
it's just that all of that traffic off those new subdivisions. You got subdivisions over there, I've got on this side, and all dumping on the 319. So the traffic on that road is crazy.
categories of roads.
Just crazy.
The different road specs for each category. And, yeah, the developer would do the TIA based on the whole master plan up front, and a drainage study based on the master plan up
Right,
front.
well, we kind of have that kind of covered right now. Because you have to account for all the development in and around where you're making the calculation,
And the drainage, yeah.
And the drainage.
Not
but not the roads.
construction.
Right.
So that would,
Right.
if we could categorize the roads, your subdivision roads, into your arterial and collector, and I don't know what all the terms are. And then upgrade the
Well, I go back to Cibolo Ridge, Phase 1, the main road in there is carrying all the traffic for Phase 1, 2, and 3.
Well, in the Brago Lake, it's phase 1 through what, 10 or 9?
9, 1
Nine.
through 9.
Yeah, same thing there in the Brago Lake.
And the same thing, well, same thing for well, they did that pretty much all at the same time.
Well, they added more, but yes.
And what about Eden Crossing?
Yeah, same thing there.
Well, and Eden Crossing is also a cut-through, so people are cutting through there off of 34, 32 to get over to the loop. So you get,
Yeah, I got them cutting across County Road 323 to get to 87. That's like a racetrack. But sheriff has sent some patrol out there and it's slowed them down a little bit.
I mean, what is a solution? I mean,
Well, we need some answers
know.
from Ms. Catherine before we can really make an intelligent decision.
A decision?
Not an intelligent decision. Well, I mean, we certainly don't want we don't want to try to implement anything that's not according to statute. So we have to understand the basics first.
I don't
And then-
necessarily.
Right, and you have to also understand that county law has been written slowly through the years, and many periods, the legislature just forgets counties and hardly passes any laws specifically related to it. So very often you get, you know, 3 lines of setting forth a new law, but you can't find anything. And the other reason is counties usually don't have the money to sue somebody to find out what the law is, you know. But, you know, maybe we'll get lucky and I've read it enough, I ought to know it off the top of my head. But I will get it.
I don't know if we need to wait another year to have someone inspecting culverts.
Nope, I mean, I guess we could go through and develop the fees and make it a no, I guess it would, at this point, it'd have to be a no-cost impact to the budget to be able to amend the budget, and put it in there. Right?
No, what was that?
Larry's looking at wanting to hire somebody pretty quick to do these driveway inspections.
He's
and
saying
get
he
the
doesn't think
driveway.
we can wait another year
Okay, well, we're still in the budget process.
Yeah.
to get somebody to add either,
Someone not only checks them, but has the authority to enforce.
would we add it to Edwin's department?
That's where it
I-
was before.
Here's the authority to enforce needs to be a peace officer.
Well,
Well,
I
at
mean,
least maybe he
the
can
authority
call-
to say, that's wrong. Stop.
Yeah, next
can't-
visit's gonna be a
Yeah.
Yeah.
deputy or
Let's see your
And
permit.
it's a lot easier for somebody with a uniform and a badge on that walks up there to tell somebody to cease construction than it is for somebody in work clothes to walk up there and tell them.
We'll get a
to cease
uniform and a
construction.
badge. What's the badge need to say?
Peace officer?
But at least he could call the commissioner or whatever and say, Commissioner, we got a problem out here, what
I mean,
do
we
you
could-
wanna
I
do?
mean, yeah.
Code enforcement, there you go.
That's it.
And they don't have to be peace officers, but they do have to have a code enforcement license.
They have something on their shirt, kind of looks like a badge that says code enforcement.
And they have to be
lot of
willing to
cities do
speak
that.
up, you
A lot
know?
of cities do that. They're not peace officers, they're just code enforcement officers. They write civil citations and that's it. I mean, yes, my guys can do that. too.
And I think if they,
Without that, that's fine.
I think if
And the
we had
constables
one,
can too, right,
people
Jim?
would- These builders would get, word would get around and
The
if.
constables can do that too, right?
Yes, sir.
And I
The
guess
only
so you could
restriction
have,
I've ever seen put on it is that, of course, we don't know what the requirements are for a legitimate driveway. So somebody has to instruct us that it ain't a legitimate construction for us to go tell them to stop. Because if we don't know, we pretty much, just because we go up there and, now, if they don't have a permit and they're required to have a permit, yeah, we can tell them. But if it's not up to standard and you want it stopped, it has to be somebody other.
Well, but that's a
well, you
completely
got enough
different.
to do
That's a
without dealing with
completely
that.
different issue, I think. Our main deal is like if a guy rolled up, if we can get him the authority to tell him to stop and issue him a citation on the spot or a cease and desist order until he's got his permit and he goes and gets his permit, pays his fees, and then he can carry on. And it would be
At least
this.
you know somebody's looking.
Right, and then it would be the same thing, if he goes and does an inspection, it doesn't meet a standard, then he's gonna give him a cease and desist order and says, you know, stop, your culvert's too small, or it's not wide as you said it was gonna be, or whatever the problem is. And,
and if they have a problem, they call the constable from that precinct.
Do lenders ever go out and inspect?
What's that?
Not very often.
Do the lenders ever?
Lender couldn't care less about the driveway.
Yeah.
They may inspect the
That's the way
house,
we,
but-
you know, the flood control, sometimes that's how we catch whether or not they're doing the flood, what do you call it, the level up?
Floodplain.
Floodplain correctly.
Well, has anybody got any suggestions on what steps we can start taking? Other than, I guess, when Catherine comes back with some
Well,
opinions?
Yeah, don't hang your head on it being as clear as we want it, but
Okay.
we'll certainly do that.
well,
We'll run it by Tom also.
Yes, I
They
will.
will, it'd be as, clear- it would really be as clear as mud then.
but I guess to Larry's point, I mean, y'all want to talk about that tonight at the budget hearing?
What's that?
Adding a person to do driveway inspections?
Yeah.
I think it could, we could raise
Now, we're
the,
to the point now, when we create another line item or something, it's gotta come from somewhere else.
Well, that's what I
We can't just, we're to the point, we can't add it to our tax
you know how many driveway permits we did last fiscal year?
rate, because our tax rate's right at it's 3.4 something. If we mess around much more, we're gonna get over the 3.5, and that ain't gonna work.
Well, I guess back to my question, to give us a little bit of time, is we could amend it to the budget when we feel comfortable we got the numbers we need to get, because I don't even know what the right salary for this individual
Hey,
would be.
here's the thing, we can amend the budget during the middle of the year and take it out of the fund balance, and then we're gonna have to make it up next year.
No, I'm not suggesting to do that, but I'm suggesting to get the mechanisms in place, figure out how many permits they're doing in a year, what a reasonable cost is for that, to be able to figure out how much of that individual salary could be paid out of the permits, and see if we can fund that position entirely from the permits or not.
That would be outstanding if we could, but at least it'd be, if we could fund part of the salary out of that, it would be
Yeah.
good.
fun part of it.
Yeah, because you're also gonna have to put a vehicle in there, which you don't have
Yeah.
a vehicle right now,
Sheriff,
and fuel.
keep the best Tahoe back. Don't sell it.
What?
The ones you're
I
selling,
already paid for it.
You woke him
If
up.
I paid for it, you gonna pay me for
Yes.
it? Okay. If I give it to you, as long as I get paid,
You know, we'll
otherwise,
buy
I'm
it
giving
from-
money up.
Y'all woke him up.
I
No,
don't
we'll buy
have
it from
any-
you.
I don't have any good Tahoes I'm gonna get rid of.
That's the deal, there's, good ones are a thing of the past.
Pretty much.
Ugh. Okay,
And now computer chips, you can't get
so
any new.
that's a good idea, let's get, I guess, figure out what it's gonna cost, you and Edwin or somebody get together. And we could fund it mid-year out of the fund balance, or some other way, and especially if we're gonna be able to go up on our, permits and get some revenue there and help fund it.
what is
Funding that and a vehicle too would be,
a driveway permit now is what?
Well, not only from the standpoint of permits, if you have somebody out all the time, a lot of these are being built with no permit. So we're missing money there that we ought to be getting, and a lot of them, or some of them being built wrong with no permit.
Yep.
There ought to be some penalty if somebody comes in and constructs one like you had, where they had to cut it out and rebuild it. Well, that was a penalty to a degree, but there ought to be a penalty for the county.
and we don't necessarily need a patrol vehicle for this person to drive. They can drive a little small pickup or something.
Get them a Volkswagen.
Toyota Prius.
Go
Something
kart.
that, you know,
All they need is transportation.
yep.
Little Ranger pickup's fine.
What?
Little Ranger pickup or
Yep.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Let's find
thinking
out
of that.
a longest.
Probably needs to be a pickup truck, not a car.
A little Ranger pickup, like extended
Jeep
cab
Liberty
type
or
or something to have a place to put your junk behind the seat and not get it wet.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of equipment they would need.
Well, they probably wouldn't need much more than a measuring tape and a few things like that, not anything significant.
A rolling tape, a measuring tape,
Yep.
maybe a little shovel.
Well, so, Jim, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. So what does this person need to have to be a code enforcement officer?
They actually have code enforcement classes. You can actually go to, I think it's a 40-hour class to be a code enforcement officer. But if you're, in your deal, that's only if they're gonna enforce the code, okay? There's nothing that says they can't drive up there and say, you don't have a permit, and just what you said. If they don't have a permit, or they ain't doing something correctly, then you call the constable and have him come over there and actually issue them something for violation. The only reason they're certified as code enforcement is to give them the authority to write a citation. Do you really need that? You really want, to listening to y'all, I would think you're more interested in somebody operating around to catch people that aren't permitted and building something that you're not aware of till after it's built by 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And in that case, all you really need is somebody with a computer that knows what's permits are out there, and, hey, this thing ain't permitted, I'm gonna call, have somebody come discuss it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That,
because
to me,
sometimes
that
by
would
the time
function.
we catch them, the builder is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I
most
just
of the time,
happen to
yes.
know who
Yeah,
the
but you
builder
still-
was on that
They
house.
do that.
You still got the builder, you still got, somebody's got a house there.
Yeah.
So they're probably gonna be upset because
If you-
if their house was built with no permit.
At the same time, you need to make certain that when they built the permit, that the proper size culvert was put in. I've had, over the years, a number of those, somebody comes along, has a house built, and you get a big rain, and the culvert's instead of throwing it on down, it's not adequate, it's too high, it's too whatever, and I got water running into the yard, and they want me to do something about it.
Oh, yeah, I've already got that issue instead
So
of which.
what's your preference for this? You want a committee off the court, or you want subdivision committee to look at it, to develop the new driveway process, and to help look at the fees and determine what the fee should be, or?
Well, I think it's some of both. I think we need to look at that. We need to look at the fee schedule and what we think it can handle. The new subdivisions, the culvert size is their size now, so.
Right.
So for the most part, that should be right, but that's assuming that they put the right size culvert in. I mean, that tells them, so that inspector would drive up and go, oh, wait a minute. That's supposed to be a 24-inch culvert. You put a 12-inch culvert in there.
And then a fine needed to be.
It would be a
issued at that point, too,
full-time job. And that would also, I guess, apply to rural culverts that go in.
Yep.
So
But in that case, if you require them to get an engineer to size a culvert, then that's obviously gonna be some cost that's there
for rural ones?
for the rural ones.
No, but just to make certain that whatever they put in,
Well, and that's why I'm saying, maybe in that case, they can propose the culvert size, and then it's up to the commissioner to verify it and say what size he wants in there, and then we're all gonna, but see, that puts the liability for that on the county, and I don't like that.
no, but if the culvert's put in wrong, then you got the water running and creating a problem with your road. It may be a matter, when you get one for a rural, that individual may meet the homeowner out there and make a recommendation. What you need here is, they may apply for a culvert and they don't need a culvert. If they're gonna put in a culvert, then that individual would look at the impact that would have on the var ditch and tell them, okay, you need an 18-inch and it needs to be placed here.
But doesn't that put the county in a liable position, Catherine, if we tell them what size culvert to put in and something goes wrong, or? No?
I don't think so.
But we're gonna have to have some standard
We do,
to go by.
15-inch minimum size.
Okay. But what would constitute a 24 or a 36?
Right now, the commissioner makes that decision.
depend on the size of the ditch and the amount of.
Bar ditch.
Okay,
You got a 3-foot bar ditch, you don't want to put a 15-inch culvert.
so here you go. Somebody went out there and put a 15-inch culvert in out there, and the ditch is about that deep. And
tell
y'all
them
go
to-
out there and
yeah.
say, okay, we needed a 36-inch or a 24 or something like that. Okay, and you're not an engineer. What's gonna back the county up here saying, okay, you need that? And they're gonna say, okay, where's your expertise to say that I needed a 24-inch culvert when I say I need a 15-inch culvert?
Well, well, I don't know, I laugh to myself because on the FM that I live on, somebody bought a lot, and they tied together several PVC pipes, small ones, and put that in. And
Well,
I
I can
called
see
Texas.
that because we've got it written in our regulations.
Well, it wasn't even mine. I called TxDOT and said, hey, you got something over here that's a problem. And TxDOT said, well, would you mind going up and telling him that that's not an issue? And I said, yeah, it's not my job, but I'll do it.
TxDOT wanted you to go tell them?
They did.
I've already run into that several times.
And so I went up and said, hey,
Huh.
I kind of stretched it. I said, hey, TxDOT got a hold of me and asked me to tell you that is not proper. And they said, well, what size culvert do I need? And I'd already looked at it, and I said, well, you need a 24-inch culvert.
You know, I think we're all right on doing that as long as that is the standard that we've been applying. I mean, if we get a bunch of commissioners that don't know anything about those types of things,
Well, that's
we may
possible.
have to have somebody, yeah, we may have to have somebody else go out and make that determination.
Well, if you got this individual who is an inspector or whatever the term is for
Well,
that,
they ought to know, yeah.
that, you know,
They're gonna have to be schooled.
they'd have to
Yeah.
be schooled, but they would
Yeah.
need to be knowledgeable on that sort of thing.
And then there are always unexpected, of course, floods, et cetera.
Yeah, well,
Those
that's
are
a different
just
story.
Excuses.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, remember how many, Leanne and I fought so many ladies over that.
Well, if we keep going, we won't have to leave.
Yes. Okay, we better beat this horse till it's about dead.
Well, so
What- so
y'all want to
what-
start with the subdivision committee on this driveway deal or what?
I would think that would be a good place to start. What do you think, Leanne?
Because any driveway regs are gonna have to mesh with our subdivision regs. We have to make sure there's no conflict.
I'm not saying that might necessarily be the final decision on it, but we could certainly start there. Do you agree, Commissioner? Well, you're on that committee. And you gentlemen, you can attend as an observation, I guess, and we could always go from there and put together a special commissioners court if we needed to discuss the
I just know
situation.
what we're doing now is not working,
Yeah, I agree.
so we need to do something different.
Okay, so we'll take it up in the Development Review Committee meeting.
When is that? Next week?
Okay,
We want to discuss it tonight.
That deal, I think, no,
what's that?
I think based on what the judge said.
Let's wait and see what we're gonna come up with, what we're gonna need, and how we're gonna work it out.
Week
How
after
much,
next.
if we can go up on our permits and help fund,
No, it is next
fund the
week.
position.
That's right.
Okay,
$80,000.
okay.
Word that on the subdivision.
Discuss and review driveway permit process? Or, yeah, that's, I mean, that's all it's
Moving
gonna
right
be.
along at 3:43, we're adjourned.